Hello students! Welcome to the second video for Unit 5. In this video, we are going to learn the important grammar you're going to need to be successful in this unit. So, let's begin. As you know, the title of this unit is Dream Houses. In the first video, you learned important vocabulary about furniture and household chores. In this video, we're going to get into the important grammar of Unit 5. Today, let's learn as adjective as and not as adjective as, adjective enough and not adjective enough, and let's also learn about the terms have to and don't have to. First, we're going to talk about this phrase, as, adjective as. Do you know what an adjective is? In Korean, adjective is 형용사. So words like beautiful, tall, short, big, small, and so on. Adjectives are words we use to describe things, right? So let's see how we can use this term as adjective as. This phrase is used to compare things. Do you know what that word means? Compare? Let's look at the definition for that. To compare two things means we're looking at what is the same or different between two things. And this phrase really helps us do that. We can also add not in front of this to make it a negative statement. So for example, let's put in the adjective tall. I could say as tall as or not as tall as. Let's take a look at some sentences using as adjective as and not as adjective as and see if we can guess what they mean. All right, here we have 3 sentences. Number 1, she is as tall as me. Number 2, the movie was not as good as I thought it would be. Number 3, the apartment is not as spacious as the house. Can you guess what these sentences mean? Let's go through these one by one and really break down what the meaning of these sentences is. Let's start with number 1. She is as tall as me. This is a positive sentence. There's no not, right? If you are as tall as someone else, it means you are the same height. So if I say she is as tall as me, that means we are the same height. I am comparing her height and my height in a positive way using as tall as, meaning our height is the same. Let's look at number 2. The movie was not as good as I thought it would be. If the movie was not as good as I thought it would be, this means that I thought the movie would be good, but it wasn't. I'm sure you have had this happen before. Maybe you saw a preview for a movie and you thought, wow, it will be amazing. And then you see the movie and, just okay. In that case, we could use not as good as. So here, the movie was not as good as I thought it would be. Now let's look at number 3. The apartment is not as spacious as the house. Do you know what that adjective means? Spacious? Spacious means there is a lot of space. We can describe houses, for example, as spacious or not spacious. So looking at this sentence, the apartment is not as spacious as the house. This means that the house has more space. We could also use comparative adjectives to say something like, the apartment is smaller than the house, or the house is bigger than the apartment. That is another way we can compare. So here we're using not as to compare an apartment and a house. Remember, we use this form to compare two things. Let's look at our second term for today. Adjective enough. We can use any adjective in this phrase. Tall enough, big enough, small enough, and so on. So first, let's look at what that word enough means. As you can see from the definition here, to have enough means you need a certain amount, and enough means you have it. Not more, not less, enough. This is a phrase used to say that something is adequate or inadequate. For example, you are tall enough to ride the roller coaster. Or, if we want to make it a negative statement, we can add not before it. Oh, you are not tall enough to ride the roller coaster. Now, let's look at some sentences with adjective enough and not adjective enough and see if we can figure out what they mean. So here are our three sentences. Number 1, the bed is big enough for 2 people. Number 2, my sister is not old enough to travel on an airplane alone. Number 3, that jacket is not warm enough to wear in winter. Can you figure out what these mean? Let's start with number 1. The bed is big enough for 2 people. This means that 2 people can sleep in the bed comfortably. It is big enough. It's not too small, it's not too big, it is big enough. Let's look at number 2. My sister is not old enough to travel on an airplane alone. This means my sister is too young to travel alone. She is not old enough. Her age is too low. So we would use not old enough. Number 3, that jacket is not warm enough to wear in the winter. This means that the jacket is too thin. You will be cold if you wear that jacket. It is not warm enough. So if this is warm enough, not warm enough means it doesn't quite meet that bar. So remember to always use this order. We never put adjectives after the word enough. So we want to say, I'm not tall enough, not I'm not enough tall. Make sure you use this phrase in the correct order. Adjective enough or not adjective enough. Now let's watch a video exploring these phrases. As adjective as and not as adjective as, adjective enough and not adjective enough. Let's watch.
Hello again! Today we're going to play Which Do You Prefer? Or I'm going to play it, and you can play along at home. Which bedroom do you prefer? Bedroom 1 is wide enough for a bed, but that's all. It isn't big enough. Bedroom 2 is not tidy enough. It's not tidy at all. Next bedroom, bedroom 3. It's lovely. The other rooms aren't as lovely as this one. Which building do you prefer? This is the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. And this is the Sydney Opera House in Australia. The Opera House is older, but the museum is as famous as the Opera House. And the Opera House isn't as interesting as the museum, but I prefer it. I think it's more beautiful. So, which ones did you prefer? Bye!
Which language does the vlogger use? We use as plus adjective plus as to compare the same quality of two things.
but the museum is as famous as the opera house.
We form the negative with not.
And the opera house isn't as interesting as the museum.
We use adjective plus enough when something is sufficient.
Bedroom 1 is wide enough for a bed.
We form the negative with not.
It isn't big enough.
Use it. Complete the sentences using enough. The bookcase isn't big enough for all the books. Now you try. The room isn't wide enough for a sofa. He's not old enough to drive a car. This room isn't large enough for my parents. This room isn't tidy enough to study.
All right, now that we have heard some excellent information about those two phrases, let's practice using them. Let's begin with some fill in the blanks. This is on page 61 in your book, so please fill this out as you watch. First, you should pause the video and try to do this on your own. Did you do it? Let's go ahead and check our answers and learn why we would use certain phrases in these sentences. Let's begin with number 1. We see, my bedroom isn't as big as my sister's. Here we are comparing two things, my bedroom and my sister's bedroom. Because we are comparing, we want to use as adjective as. We know our word has to be big, so as big as. Let's go to number 2. I'm not to reach the top shelf. Okay, we want to use the word tall, but should we use as or adjective enough? Well, are we comparing anything here? I'm not to reach the top shelf. There is no comparison here. We're not looking at my bedroom and my sister's bedroom. We're just making a statement about something about how tall we are. So here we would want to use adjective enough. I'm not tall enough to reach the top shelf. Now let's go to number 3. Is this sofa for us all to sit on it? Here our adjective is wide. So again, let's look at this sentence. Are we comparing anything? It looks like we're just talking about a sofa. So again, we should use adjective enough. Is this sofa wide enough for us all to sit on it? Number 4. That car is an apartment. Okay, and our adjective here is expensive. Are we comparing two things? Well, we have a car, and on the other side we have apartment. So yes, we are comparing. So we would want to use as adjective as. That car is as expensive as an apartment. This means the car and the apartment are the same price. Very expensive. Now that we've had some practice filling in the blanks and looking at what kind of sentences we use as, and enough with, let's complete the second sentence so it has the same meaning as the first. Just like we did before, where we had a sentence with as, adjective as, or adjective enough, and then we figured out what they meant, we're going to do it in reverse this time. So let's look at number 1. We can't put a sofa in this small room. Okay, we know the room is very small, so we cannot put a sofa in there. So we would want to say this room is not large enough for a sofa, right? We want to use that adjective large. The room isn't large enough for the sofa to go in it. This means the same thing as we can't put a sofa in this small room. Let's look at number 2. My room is tidier than my sister's room. Ooh, we have a little hint here. Tidier than. Remember before I mentioned we can also use comparative adjectives. Tidier than, bigger than, smaller than. Here we see a comparative adjective, tidier than. So yes, we are comparing two things. That means we can also use as, adjective as. So we would say my sister's room is not as tidy as my room. Right? My room is tidier. My sister's room is not as tidy as my room. This means the same thing as my room is tidier than her room. It's cleaner. Number 3. A microwave is quicker than a cooker. Okay, let's look at this sentence. How is this sentence similar to number 2? What do you see in that first sentence? Do you see quicker than? That's another comparative adjective. So we know we are definitely comparing two things. We can also see that we have two nouns, microwave and cooker. So we're comparing them. This means we should use as, adjective as. Again, we're switching it around. A cooker, a microwave. So if we want to use the adjective quick, we could say, a cooker is not as quick as a microwave. Number 4. Ennis is 18 now, so he can drive a car. So if we want to use the adjective old, we are not comparing two things, right? So we do not use as, adjective as. Here we can say Ennis is old enough to drive a car. So remember, when we are comparing two things, like in number 2 and number 3, we can use as, adjective as, or not as, adjective as, not as tidy as, not as quick as. When we're talking about one thing, and that it is maybe too big or too small, we can use adjective enough or not adjective enough, isn't large enough, and is old enough. Whew, okay, now that we know how to use as, adjective as, and adjective enough, let's look at our third and final grammar phrase we're going to use today. Have to and don't have to. This phrase is used to express something you must or must not do. Here we can see the meaning of have to. 해야 한다. This is a way to say you have no choice. You have to do it. We can also use the word obligation. You have to do it. Let's look at some sentences first using these phrases. You have to attend class, right? If you want a good grade, you need that attendance. You have to attend class. Next, we'll see it in a question. What do you have to do for this assignment? What do you need to do? What must you do? We can use these words interchangeably. She has to work tomorrow. She has no choice. She has to work tomorrow. She doesn't have to go to school on Saturday. Now that we've looked at some sentences using have to and don't have to, let's dig a little deeper. To dig a little deeper, let's watch a video exploring these phrases. Make sure you watch carefully, and I will see you soon.
Hello! Today's question, how do you make chores fun? I have to vacuum the living room, and I have to help clean the kitchen. It's kind of boring. So how do you make chores fun? Sid from Brazil says he has to load the dishwasher at his parents' restaurant. Wow, that must be a lot of dishes. Do you have to do the cooking too? No, I don't, but I want to learn. Great! Okay. Bridget from Portugal. She has to help watch her baby brother. It's fun because he's so cute. Harumi from Japan says, I don't have to tidy up at home, but we have to clean our school every day. Doing chores with friends can be fun. Thanks for the great ideas. Doing chores will be so much more fun now. Bye.
Which language does the vlogger use? We use have to talk about obligations.
I have to vacuum the living room. But we have to clean our school every day. He has to load the dishwasher. She has to help watch her baby brother.
To form the negative, we use don't or doesn't plus have to.
I don't have to tidy up at home.
She doesn't have to clean her school. We use do to form questions. Notice the word order.
Do you have to do the cooking too?
Yes, I do. No, I don't. Does Sid have to help his parents? Yes, he does. No, he doesn't. Use it. Say the sentences using have to or don't have to. She has to load the dishwasher. Now you try. They have to help do the gardening. He doesn't have to vacuum. We don't have to feed the cat.
Okay, guys, now that we have watched that very informative video, let's fill in the chart on page 63 in your book. Just like before, please try it on your own first. So when you watch this, we're just checking your answers. Did you do it? Let's go ahead and check. First, let's look at how we use have to and don't have to with the subjects I, you, we, and they. Number 1, I clean the kitchen. Here we simply say, I have to clean the kitchen. Next we see I don't have to load the dishwasher. So the subjects I, you, we, and they are very simple. I have to, I don't have to. We have to, we don't have to. And in a question, do you have to do the washing up? Yes, I do. No, I don't. So here we keep our verb have the same throughout. Now let's look at the subjects he, she, and it. He has to make his bed. What about the negative form? Would we say don't have to? No, here we would say he doesn't have to do much. Remember that the verb do, like all other verbs, changes when we use it with he, she, or it. Remember learning about the simple present tense. When we have a verb after he, she, or it in simple present, we need to add s, es, or ies. He runs, she walks. It's the same with do. I do, he does. So he doesn't have to do much. Now let's look at the question. Does Liam have to help your parents? Yes, he does. No, he doesn't. Let's look a little closer here. Okay, so we say he has to, but we say, does he have? Why is that? Why do we say, does he have, does she have, and does it have? Shouldn't we use has? We say he has, right? Well, let's take a look at two sentences. How many verbs are in this sentence? He has to clean his room. How about in this question? Does he have to clean his room? In number 1, we see the verbs has and clean. And in number 2, we see does, have, and clean. What do we notice here? Is every verb changed for the subject he? No, only the first verb. He has to clean, right? We don't say he has to cleans. And here our first verb does he? And then our next verbs have and clean stay the same. We would not say, does he has to cleans his room? No, no, no. So the rule is we only have to conjugate or change the main verb in the sentence. He has to clean his room. And it's the same in a question. Does he have to? Let's look at these sentences and see if we can figure out which is correct. Remember, only the main verb in the sentence needs to be conjugated. So let's begin with number 1. Does she has to work or does she have to work? What do you think? Is it A or B? Did you guess B? Here we only need to say, does she have to work? Our main verb in this sentence is does, and it matches she. So we do not need to change have. Does she have? Now let's look at number 2. Did he go to school or did he goes to school? What do you think? A or B? It's A. So here our subject is he and our main verb is did. These match, right? Did he? He did. So again, we do not need to change our second verb. Last, let's look at number 3. She wants to play basketball later, or she wants to play basketball later. Did you guess? It's B. So here our main verb is wants, which matches she. She wants. So again, we do not need to change that second verb. Remember, we only have to conjugate the main verb in the sentence. And this is true when we're using have to and has to, and for other sentences in English, as you can see. Okay, now that we've learned how to use have to and has to with other verbs, let's plug them into some sentences. So here we have 4 verbs in this box, and we want to use these verbs with the correct form of have to or don't or doesn't have to, right, in these sentences. So number 1, the children don't have to go to school in summer. We knew to use go because we say go to school, right? Check, go to school. And in summer, well, in many places in the world, children don't have to. They do not need to. They are not obligated to. The children don't have to go. Let's do number 2. Sam, with chores because he's only 4 years old. Okay, with chores. Would we say do with chores, help with chores, or work with chores? Here we want to use the word help. All right, and he's only 4, so do we think that he does help with chores or he does not? He's only 4, so he does not. So here we'd say Sam doesn't have to help with chores because he's only 4. All right, let's look at number 3. The ironing on Saturdays, and it's so boring. Okay, we've used help, so would we say I do the ironing or I work the ironing? We would say do the ironing. All right, and here whoever I is saying, oh, it's so boring. So maybe that means I have to do the ironing and it's so boring. Okay, so we know in our last sentence we're going to use work, and here we're going to use it as a question. Blank your mum blank at the weekends. Would we say do or does with mom? We would use does, right? Okay, and remember, do we need to change the word work? Do we say work or works? We would say, does your mom have to work at the weekends? So our other verbs have and work stay the same. What household chores do you have to do? Do you think they're boring too? Okay, everyone, that is it for our video today. So today we learned how to use as, adjective enough, and their negative forms with not, and also have to and don't have to. Make sure to check eClass for assignments. See you next time.